Bartenders of Reddit. What is the strangest conversation you've ever overheard? Because people assume sound doesn't travel over the bar. A customer's on the phone in the middle of the bar. Not too crowded, but a long bar. Guy couldn't have been more than 25. I go to help someone at the end of the bar. And on my way back, I overhear, "No, I don't care. She's my sister, and there is no reason she should be doing substances at all." Gave him a few drinks on the house that night. Story 2. These siblings, aged 50-60s, arguing over their not even dead, and in fact present at the table, mother's will and who gets what. It ended in a heated argument, and the son speeding off. Story 3. Had someone yell, "Rip Olivia Newton-John," and I interjected that she wasn't dead. Big mistake. Drunk idiot got on one of those drunk loops about how I was wrong until we closed 20 min later. I even showed him on my phone that she wasn't dead, and he said, "You can Google anything." For those speculating what my response was should have been, I just kept saying, "You're allowed to be wrong," as he kept on about it until I locked the door. Story 4. Back when you kept a newspaper on the bar, guy walks in and goes straight for the paper, looks in one section, then the other, places paper down. I asked him if he found what he was looking for, and he said no. His ex isn't dead or in jail. Then he asked for a beer. Story 5. I've heard discussions on if my boobs were real. Listened to a couple in an open marriage and apparently bisexual scout out the picking for the evening. Listened to tons of people telling theirs so that they were working late. One guy even met a date later. Listened to a couple have a very intense whispered argument about custody. I assumed a kid. Turned out to be a cat. Listened to a couple guys plan how to rob me. Bartending was fun. I miss it sometimes. Story 6. What happens a lot while working in bars is that you overhear small snippets of conversation that sound really weird, taken out of context. Stuff like, "The best way to steal eggs is to pretend that they are something else." "The dogs wouldn't stand a chance against Bruce Springsteen in his prime." "I don't know if she can swim, but she bought sandals in the 90s. I usually entertain myself making up stories about these conversations. Story 7. On Valentine's Day this year, we had a guest who accepted a FaceTime from his girlfriend while his side chick was with him at the bar. He angled the phone so his girlfriend wouldn't see the girl, but it was so obvious. Story 8. These 3 middle-aged women, alone at the bar, discussing in excruciating detail their sexual fantasies, which seemed to include, do BJ a younger man? I was 22 at the time. They obviously knew I could hear them, but it was so awkward. I stood there, cutting the hell out of lemons and lime. Story 9. 2 guys sitting at a bar. One was telling the other that he hit himself really bad at work recently. "Bro, did you go and get stitches?" "No, I put sugar on it." "Sugar?" Shrugs. "I'm Haitian." "I feel you, bro. I'm Colombian. I would have put coffee on it." Story 10. I overheard a guy telling his friend that he was going to have sex with that bartender, pointing to me. He proceeded to say, "She might not be there, but I am still going to have sex with her." Story 11. Once this older couple, 55-ish, were talking about their bedroom problems. The guy clearly had impotence issues, and the lady kept complaining that she was feeling frustrated because he was frustrated. And medics wasn't really helping, or at least not helping enough. Let's just say that other people around them weren't as comfortable as them about the conversation. Story 12. 2 businessmen having after-work drinks on a Friday, where the conversation built up to one of the sweetest sentiments I've heard. At first the usual, "Let me tell you, you're a good person. I love you, man." Later on, still fairly basic, duck the wives, "Hey, you and me, we buy motorcycles." To finally this gem, "If a tornado were to blow you away, I would fly after you." Story 13. 3 girls were talking about some guy one of them was hooking up with. Apparently, the night before, she'd puked all over his junk. Still boned. Got all the details I never wanted. Story 14. I worked in a bar and a truck stop, and we got lots of solo men. Guy on Barstool says, "The government can track our every move. Now they're putting chips in newborns right at the hospital." The trucker next to him, who he just met, shakes his head and says, "Yeah, I know." Both were serious as could be and talked with each other about how the world is messed up. It was the second trucker's response that got me. Story 15. Not me, as I'm a cook, but a bartender I worked with and was good friends with overheard a regular that was a businessman who traveled to China, often bragging about getting escort while there. Made sure to tell everyone who knew him about it. Story 16. I keep asking him to shoot it on my face. It's good for my skin, but he refuses. He says he doesn't want it to disrespect me, but I'm literally begging. I was washing glasses right in front of these 2 girls at my bar. It wasn't even like I was far away across the bar. Story 17. You won't come home with me because I have a stinky pussy sob. Middle-aged woman on a first date at like 7 o'clock on a Wednesday. The guy was planning on going home with her until that, I guess. Story 18. I once listened to 3 people have an in-depth discussion about how they were going to kill the local vampire and the steps to take to protect themselves from the coven that said, "Vampire is surely from." My favorite, though, what a heated debate. over whether the first Robin would be a crime fighter if Batman hadn't picked him up and trained him. Story 19. I once heard a guy tell his buddy, "It's fun, it's like laser tag but with real guns." That was 20 years ago, and to this day, kick myself for not getting the whole story. Story 20. Was visiting my mom at work once, she tends bar, and heard her making conversation across the bar with a patron. Suddenly, over the music, I hear the guy slam his fist onto the bar and yell, "You are factually wrong." He immediately face planted on the bar, and his buddy had to carry him out of there. My mom was just commenting on the fact that the song that was playing was country. Story 21. This guy was going through a divorce and his buddy was consoling him. He kept saying he'd never find someone as kinky as her. His buddy tried to tell him plenty of people are kinky, to which he replies, "You don't get it, dude. She pleasured herself while we ducked." Story 22. One time I walked out to the patio to have a smoke break into 3 people, all talking very drunkenly, but also very seriously about theoretical physics. Story 23. I bartended at a country club, and there was this one group of tennis ladies that would always sit at the bar and get absolutely crap-faced on weeknights at our wine nights. They took a liking to our main bartender and kept calling him exotic. He's Mexican. They would say how love his beard, would talk about their fava, not tennis-related positions, how they kept their nether regions tidy, slip him their numbers, how crap their husbands were, etc. Gave me death glares every time I'd be bartending / bar backing with him. Story 24. Randomly overheard 2 middle-aged women. As a woman ages, she can choose between her face or her a hole, but she can't choose both. I have no idea. Story 25. I've seen it all. 1. A couple who was obviously not married to each other. They were on a business trip and would get drunk and make out like once a month when they met at my bar. 2. A lawyer and a judge who are definitely not in the same place, talking about a murder. 3. If you didn't want it there, why did you ask for it? Sex. Look, I'm not escort. I'm just going through a phase where I duck dudes. Those are my fav. Note, these are just some I'm prone to remember. I'm not calling the police to tell them that one time, when I bartended the judge and lawyer that I don't know drank together. If Trump builds a wall and I send my wife on a cruise, will she stay there? Well, what do you mean you wouldn't duck a guy who wears flip-flops to the bar? This one actually makes me. He was pleading his case to a girl who was gay, attempting to persuade her. 7. People watching pterodactyl adult film? Yes, it's a thing. 8. A full-on discussion about how to get guys to buy you drinks, which ended in both girls buying their own drinks. Come on, ladies, it's 2019. 9. We have a very strict policy on do not duck customer. A customer actively tried to petition this with my boss who was there. He was convinced one of us would bang him if he lifted the ban. Dude, I'm here for the money, not to be told how wildly hit but also cute I am. I heard that line when Ryan Gosling said it the right way. 10. Numerous people answering their phones and saying they are at somewhere they are not, or lying about how much they have had. I always shoot a look for that one. 11. Today. I used to make her wear the headdress when I screwed her. I didn't even acknowledge that one. Story 26. Work in a downtown hotel bar right across from our convention center. I've heard way too many negotiations between businessmen and escorts. Last one I heard involved the guy asking the lady how much extra she would charge to let his friend watch. She said it was $200 to watch and $500 if he joins in. Story 27. I've bartended, but my favorite conversation was overhead while I was on the other side of the bar. Look, all I'm saying is Grand Theft Auto severely ruined our generation's perception of how many police helicopters exist. Sounded like they were getting really heated over the matter. Story 28. Guy. I think I'm going to need a Coke chaser for this one. Girl, presumably so. We already did all the Coke. Guy. Coca-Cola, you idiot. Not even the most memorable, just the most recent. For sure, a real snapshot into their relationship. Story 29. Had a husband and wife who were by far the most rude people I've ever encountered, talking with a traveling businessman. By the end of the night, the businessman was propositioning the woman to go back to his hotel room for some money. The husband responded for $500. You can let him have. Story 30. I once heard a guy talking to his buddy about how he likes to have sex with both a female and male at the same time and likes to lick up. Everyone's got their preferences, but that was not something I expected to hear. Story 31 was a bartender at a hotel bar. Had all sorts of interesting folks come through. One time a group of guys of varying ages all came down and took the biggest table. No big deal, it was a slow night. They proceeded to reach in their bags and set up a game of Dungeons and Dragons and start playing, accents and all. I distinctly remember something about Bob the Necromancer. The other guests thought it was funny and interesting, so I figured no harm, no foul. Let them play all night. Later in the night, the same guys still playing, we witnessed some guy with a gold robot head made of cardboard go running by the main window of the bar. He was wearing the gold robot head shoes and nothing else. The cops arrived shortly after and we all had to give statements. The cops proceeded to interrogate me about the D&D players because they like to dress up in weird costumes, right? I told the cops that the guys hadn't left the table all night. One member of the adventuring party bid the cops farewell, in character. Another time I had a camera crew show up and start setting up. They were apparently with some ghost hunting show and were checking to see if we were haunted. I guess the owner had put them up to it. No press is bad press, so I let them do their thing. Apparently we were super haunted, not the exact words they used. But the episode never made it to air. They ended up finding a secret crawl space, which was pretty cool, but it was completely empty. Story 32, well, I'm not a bartender, but I once went to a very loud Cuban dance party, in a church if it matters, and was trying poorly to chat with a lovely young lady, and she was scream-talking to her friend when the music suddenly stopped at the end of the song, and in that half second of silence, she hollered out, "I don't care, I just want to get laid." I thought that was a good sign, since she was clearly talking about me, which was unusual. Made it back to her place and she showed me her angel sticks, gaiety things you pull out, and they have a word that describes you. I got forgiving, and she concentrated really hard, then pulled out efficient, and burst into tears and locked herself in the bathroom. I let myself out. Story 33, ex-bartender, guy who worked for Von Miller, linebacker for the Denver Broncos, was a regular and would sit at my bar. Heard many things about Von's life that humanized him to me, instead of him being some superstar. Story 34. I had two people discussing if gimp suits were hot or not. The minute I cleared my throat in mid-sentence, they switched to talking about the whiskey they were drinking. Story 35. Guy and girl come in. She says she got him a birthday present. It was a remote control for a sex toy she had somehow attached to herself. They didn't know I heard the conversation. They keep telling me and everyone who came to the bar to press the button. I just played along like I didn't know what they were doing. It was fun to watch the whole thing play out. I was intrigued, so I brought the idea home to my girlfriend of 2 years. No go, damn. That's the kind of thing you suggest during the 6-month honeymoon stage of your relationship. After that, forget about it. Story 36. I was bartending at a hotel bar in a historical district of a vacation town. We had quite a few semi-celebrities come through, and it was pretty cool getting to meet them, but it was a regular thing. Never really got starstruck. Then, a guy started coming in every couple of months and always wore a Marshall University hat. I always just assumed he was alumni or fan, but once I got to know him, I found out it was much deeper than that. He played for the Marshall football team that the movie We Are Marshall depicted. He was on the team the year after the horrific plane crash that killed the majority of the team. Me being a huge fan of the movie and the story behind it, we talked about it and his personal experience with the whole thing for hours. It was crazy impressive what all he and that team went through. Not only was he one of the nicest gentlemen I ever met, but he was genuinely compassionate to a lot of the older folks that came through while he was there. He always went out of his way to open doors, pulls chairs out for random strangers, and really just made the bar an enjoyable place to be when he was there with his friendly conversations with everyone. Like I said, he only came in every few months, so he found out my last shift was going to be around the next time he was in town, and told me he'd be there to have a drink with me. My last shift, he walks in and surprised me with a Marshall University football autographed with a short note by Red Dawson, who was the coach that much of the movie was based on, and the signed copy of the movie. It's now on display in my living room, and I love when people ask about it, and I get to tell the story. Story 37. Bartender in Lodo in Denver. The strangest disturbing thing I've ever overheard was these two guys with this girl. The girl goes to the bathroom, and I overheard the two guys talking about who was going to duck with this girl. A pretty normal conversation, but then they started talking about how they were going to get this girl super wasted and take advantage of her. They started talking about how both of them might get some from this girl once she gets wasted. It was a pretty disturbing conversation at this point. So when the girl comes back from the bathroom, they all close out their tabs to head to another bar. So I tell the girl something is wrong with her card, and to step to the corner of the bar, where the register is, and begin to tell her what I overheard. She was shocked and said she appreciated it. She thanked me and called an Uber, and didn't go to any other bar with these guys. Don't know what she told the guys, but they were confused and kind of pissed. When she left, they were trying to figure out what went wrong. Public service announcement. If you start talking about abusing girls in front of a bartender, we will step in and do the right thing. Story 38. A lady, her weird boyfriend, and the girl's sister at my bar. When the girl went to the bathroom, her sister scooted in towards him and was saying they should get out of there before her sister gets out of the bathroom and go get a motel. They both must have seen something I didn't, because this dude was ugly. Story 39. People don't realize that we can generally hear everything you're saying, regardless of how loud it is. The speakers are usually positioned to the outside of the bar, so we can hear. This girl I used to work with at a different establishment years ago kept insisting that I hated her to her friends for over 5 minutes, which isn't true. I just don't particularly like her, but I was very polite. So I turn around and address her in front of her friends and say, "I know you don't realize that I can hear you, but I don't hate you." I made it very uncomfortable for her, and her friends laughed. A little background. There has been multiple times that she's come in that I tried to bridge the awkward and uncomfortable because she comes in pretty often. It's my job to make everyone feel positive. My income relies on it. She's the one that's been rude, which is why I don't particularly like her. And I had enough. An example of her being rude is once she was crying hard at the bar, I bring her a water and a few napkins without her asking and without saying anything or even looking at her too much. Instead of kicking her out, which is what I normally do in this situation, she scoffs okay and rolled her eyes and ignores me for the rest of the time she's there when I ask if she needs anything. On multiple occasions, she ordered a drink. She had just a bad ducking attitude for no reason. I see roughly 200, 500 faces, and I manage 2 9 people a night. I don't have the energy to actively hate someone. But talking crap about me, right in front of me for at least 5 minutes, pushes my buttons, and I'm not the type of person that quietly sits by. She's been nice ever since. Story 40. Not a bartender, but I heard 2 girls discussing how the bartender, who was easily within listening distance, would be attractive if he wasn't fat. Then they went on to joke about how he probably takes so many bathroom breaks because he is stuffing his face with fries in the back room. They were drunk and loud and weren't looking in his direction. I don't know if they realized he was so close by. The bartender was looking over and clearly listening in, but when he saw that I noticed what was going on, he just got red in the face. Poor guy. Story 41. Not necessarily the strangest thing I've overheard while working as a bartender, but perhaps one of the most insane. I worked at a bar in rural Massachusetts, about an hour west of Boston. This place was the epitome of dive bars. We had keno, beer pong, darts, fried food, jello shots, and an aggressively loud jukebox. You get the idea. When I was hired by the owner, I went through 5 days of training and then was told I'd be solo from 10 p.m. on nights from Monday, Thursday, and then have a second bartender from Friday to Sunday. Mind you, this bar is 50 feet long with a full kitchen, which was basically an automatic deep fryer and a panini press. Initially, I was terrified. I thought to myself, how in the highfalutin hell am I going to manage a full bar, outside area, keno, and a kitchen by myself? Needless to say, after a few days, I got the hang of it, even if I thought the owner was a cheap a-hole. Now, this bar was a weird amalgamation of people, and it opened at 6 p.m. and until roughly 1 a.m., it was mostly town locals drinking pitchers of beer and gambling. They were my favorite. However, after 1 a.m., we were Insanity Central, as we were the only bar with a liquor license in central Massachusetts with a liquor license until 2 a.m. Mind you, I also have no security, but police know this place well. One night as I'm clocking in and the afternoon bartender is clocking out, a woman walks in. Let's call her Linda. Linda was a known pillhead in town. I had never met her before, and would come into the bar for our dollar shot specials, Rumpelmins. As the other bartender was leaving, she said, "Be careful with her." I didn't think much of it, as the bar is usually full of people I wouldn't be friends with, but had no problem serving. Linda sits down at the bar and asks for a dollar shot, so I pour it and she sips on it while making rambling but polite conversation. It's not busy, so I chat with her for a couple minutes and go back to restocking and washing dishes. After about 30 minutes, she asks, "What can I get for $8? I replied her a couple beers, 1 drink with liquor, blah blah. She wants a mudslide. I think, okay, whatever. I'm not busy and chucking jello shots at drunk college kids, so sure. Then Linda says, "Make sure to make it strong." Now, I don't know if other bartenders will feel the same, but a guaranteed way to get a light drink is to ask for it strong. I hate it. If you're decent, I'll pour heavy most occasions, but ask for it strong, and you're getting a baby drink. I serve her drink, and as it starts getting busier, I notice her flagging me down again for another drink as a local had given her some money for another dollar shot. I walk up to her, and she is smashed, and it's not from the drink. She had clearly taken something. She wasn't causing a particular problem, so I said to her, "Linda, how about before your next drink, we wait some time and I'll get you a water and you can just hang out. Or if I like, I can call the police or a taxi to take you home." Something about this set her off, slowly at first, but she just kept asking for another drink every single time I walked by. I politely told her, "I'm not over-serving you, and if you don't want to stay here without a drink, you are free to walk home, or I'll arrange something for you." It was about this time I had to change a keg in the back, so I left the bar and went to the walk-in inside of the kitchen. All of a sudden, I hear crashing and screaming from the bar area and run around the corner only to find Linda coming over the bar. This Karen straight up jumped over the bar and into the shelves with the bottles behind the bar. I tried to stop her, and she started chucking bottles at me like she was trying out for a minor league baseball team. I ran into the back and called the cops. I got to watch her being dragged out by her feet by the local cops. Fast forward a couple weeks later and she shows up again. By this point, it's 1 o'clock, and I don't even see her walk in because it's slammed, and I'm crying inside trying to make a million drinks. No, Jenny, I won't make you an 8-minute Girl Scout shot for you and your 19 friends because there are 300 people in here. We have a smoking area out back. We called it the cage because, well, it's a cage. All of a sudden, I look at the screen that shows the camera out back, and it's a full-on Jerry Springer brawl. Lo and behold, a man comes in dragging a very angry Linda and restraining her as I call the police. Apparently, she picked up a metal bar stool and bashed a stranger in the face for no reason. She was again taken away by police and trespassed from the property. The kicker of the story is the man who she assaulted came inside immediately after, and I brought him a towel as he was bleeding badly from his face and head. The only thing he said to me was, "Can I have another drink?" I called an ambulance. Sorry for formatting. I'm on mobile. Don't hate me. Story 42. I work in a hotel bar. There's a couple that comes in every Monday. The kicker is that they're not married to each other. The woman got drunk and asked the guy if he thought about her when he ducked his wife. Story 43. Not a bartender, but I love hanging out on the riverfront and sounds travels quite well there. I overheard the gentlemen that were hanging out near me discussing whether to rob me or not. Story 44. A girl was telling her friend that she likes the curve of her boyfriend's junk, and when he does her from behind and grabs her boobs, it's the best thing ever. They were 2 of maybe 5 people in the whole bar, and she got quiet when I re-entered the bar from the kitchen. I heard every word, and it was only more awkward for me that she began talking quietly instead of waiting to have the conversation when there weren't people to hear it. I guess it isn't actually the strangest, but it was the most awkward. Story 45. Was at a bar with my friend, and all we heard was, "Yeah, he pissed me off, so I ran him over." Still no idea what happened, but I didn't want to inquire for obvious reasons. Story 46. I will tell you the strangest thing that's happened to me. I cut someone off because they were pissed. That person returned hours later while we were closing. I said, "Sorry, mate, you're not getting a drink. I've already cut you off." "Oh, is that right?" "Yeah, it is." "Well then." And he proceeds to pull out a cooked fillet of chicken from his pocket and puts it on the bar and leaves without saying another word. Dumbfounded, me and my mate carefully pick up the cooked chicken fillet. It was cold. So this lunatic has gone home and cooked a chicken fillet, then put it into his fridge on the intention of later placing it onto our bar top as some sort of horse head in the bed kind of revenge. We still have no bloody idea what he was doing. Story 47, a 25F, recently had a bar guest on her. 33F, first Tinder date, recently divorced, show up extra nervous. She ordered a drink and we chit-chatted for a bit. After a while, her date showed up. He ordered a coffee and ended up telling his date that he was only 18. She immediately cringed and told him that he seemed very sweet, but he should be honest on his profile from now on, where he said he was somewhere around 30. He then started just insulting her age from then on out, asking things like, "I bet you remember the Clinton administration," and other stupid crap I can't remember. LMAO, that poor lady. She sent him home and I got off shortly after, then we got hammered. Story 48. Working a wedding. He was the uncle of the groom. Just got out of prison the week prior. Think he was in for 20 years or so. He was a pilot that smuggled CK for a Colombian cartel. Went by the name Big Daddy, didn't believe him. Showed us a tattoo on his right shoulder that said Big Daddy, followed by pics and a whole bunch of stories. No one knew he was invited. Let's just say he tipped very well. Story 49. I haven't heard anything truly weird, but I did overhear a fellow barman saying to a woman who'd been giving the eye for a while that he thought I already had a girlfriend. The interested lady immediately looked disappointed and turned away to rejoin her friends. The knew I was single at the time. He was just cock-blocking me. This lady was cute, a nurse in palliative care, and we'd spoken a couple of times earlier that night. Even all these years later, the idea that some chump just shut me down for no reason at all pisses me off. I kept my eye open for that chick further down the line, but never saw her again. A tallish brunette palliative care nurse. I hope you're still out there, looking and being awesome. Story 50. Heard a woman talking about how she had been starving the pigs she was farming for a few days. She then proceeded to say they ate all but the hair and teeth of Danny. Don't know if Danny was a person or what, but I let my manager know what was said. Story 51. This guy came in looking stupid happy and was buying random people drinks, hugging the people next to him, talking about how his life was going so great. A few moments later, these detectives placed him under arrest. The charges? Lost his mother earlier that week. Story 52. I mean, yeah, technically he fisted me. My junk is thicker than his wrist is. It hardly counts. Said by a huge man to his friend when they were talking about his new boyfriend. Really changed the dynamic of their relationship in my head. In fairness, I haven't seen his manhood, but his boyfriend did have very dainty wrists. Story 53. Finally something I can answer. For context, Tuesdays were always the quietest evening of the week where I worked. And because of that, I ended up getting a lot of first dates turning up. Your typical mid-30s, so Tuesdays became known as Tinder Tuesdays. I worked alone on these evenings, so I got to see a lot of funny and awkward situations where the dates either weren't who they said they were, or didn't look anything like their photos. But then one week, a man in his mid-40s who looks like a young Boris Johnson, think the mop of straw hair on his head, comes in and drinks 5 Jaeger bombs in a row and 3 vodka cokes. I'm thinking this is a bit much for Dutch courage, but who am I to judge? He's then joined by a couple around the same age. They have wine, they start some small talk, and then as the wine flows, they get louder and louder. They're the only people in the pub at this point. Turns out they're swingers, and this guy is a prospective seat to swing on, I guess. I then overheard probably the most graphic way a couple had ever met, and sex, by the way, for those wondering, and then a very, very detailed way in which she gets shared out, cuckolded and watched by her husband quite regularly. She also works with horses for a living, and he collects vintage car parts, but that's less interesting. I think they finally clicked on to the point that I was listening, and then left quite soon afterwards with a "see you in 20 minutes" to Boris. He had another 3 Jaeger bombs and then ordered an Uber. 2 weeks pass by, it's Tuesday again, and a really nice chatty guy comes to the bar. We get chatting as I serve him. He buys me a drink, which is uncommon in the UK but always welcome. Hint, hint. He eventually goes and sits in our beer garden out the front. We are a converted boat on a river. Our beer garden is on the bank outside. I go out to clear some glasses, and who is he sat with? Yep, Mr. and Mrs. Please Duck My Wife, who are both sat opposite him with a look that I can only describe as starving orphans looking at a second bowl of porridge. I didn't hang around to hear this conversation. I mean, it was funny before, but once you've heard one load of swingers intricately describing their sexual preferences, you've probably heard them all. But I did see him get into their car. They repeated this fortnightly for about 2 months with a different man each time. And then, like the whirlwind of casual sex they were, as quickly as they appeared, they were never to be seen again. I do still wonder if promiscuous Boris Johnson ever made it to their house and could perform after half a bottle of Jägermeister, but I guess some mysteries are never to be solved. Story 54. I work at a wine bar. A couple is sitting there and the girl basically yells at the guy, "Stop staring at my calf. People are starting to think we're weird." I just kept polishing glasses and walked away. Story 55. Caveat. They knew I heard them as they were sitting at the bar, and I was the bartender. 3 people come in together, 2 guys and a girl. The bar was set up with mirrors on 2 sides and a walkway between them. One of the fellows asked me why he couldn't see himself in the mirror when he was sitting directly in front of the walkway. I gave him one of those side-eyed glances, thinking to myself, does he really want me to answer this question? He kept looking at me questioningly, so I finally told him, there is no mirror there. That is a walkway. His friends burst out laughing and told me this guy was a med student at Duke. I walked away to get my laugh in. Story 56. You say sound doesn't travel over the bar, and sometimes that's true. Best night I've ever bartended was when a deaf convention was in town and the bar was packed. But the only thing you could hear was background music. Since I know how to sign, I happened to see a conversation from across the bar about a guy cursing out another guy for ducking his sister that weekend. Every 5 minutes, a duck you was exchanged, and eventually the sister shows up, because the guy told me, and is seen later leaving with another dude. Don't need to hear a conversation to know what's going down. Story 57. My dive bar has a very regular set of blue-collar dudes who come hang out in the afternoon. I'm talking every single day. Over the 5 years I've worked there, I've forgotten more lewd and bizarre conversations than most people have in a lifetime. I love it. One of my favorites, though, is when we talk extensively about the inner workings of bukkake. How's everyone arranged? Stadium style? What's the protocol on eye contact? This goes on for hours and happens every few months. Also, a couple weeks ago, I heard a girl say to her boyfriend, "You duck and suck. Thank for my sex toy." Story 58. Not a bartender, but a few nights ago, I overheard a girl telling the 5 dudes at her table about how she slept with her friend's boyfriend named Monkey. It was at a beachfront Hooters. Story 59. Not overheard, but experienced the strangest conversation with a patron. Was working behind the bar on a quit week night when a 19-20-year guy comes and ordered a cocktail. As I'm making it, we start talking, and he is overly open. We talk about his work and just general chitter for a bit. Then, he brings up the fact that he had recently quit smoking, but that the hardest part wasn't the cravings, but the fact that his sense of smell had come back, and he could now smell if girls were on their period. Apparently, this is a thing that some people can do, but I had never heard it at the time. Super uncomfortable story. 60. This married guy was a business owner, tree trimming business, and came in for lunch with his work crew, and there was a few fun, loving ladies in there from out of town, and he ended up chatting with one of them and drinking a few beers. He ended up telling his crew that they were done for the day and they left. He proceeded to get crap-faced with this woman, and he was flirting with her like crazy, and everybody could hear him. By 6 p.m., he was proper drunken, talking about leaving together with this lady. They were at a table by the jukebox, and then in walks his wife, and he had no clue. She sat right behind him at the nearby table and listened for 10 minutes until he noticed her sitting there. I guarantee that he had some splaining to do when he got home. It was kind of satisfying because this guy was a hole to my friend and I when we were 16 and at his house, hanging out with his daughter and her friend. These girls invited us to their house and took us there, and we were just hanging out, and her dad, the guy in my story, flips out and tells us to get TF out. This was in the middle of the country, and it was like 100 degrees out, and we had to walk about 7 miles back into town. So when I saw his wife come in, I could have subtly notified him. Instead, I just watched and listened to him dig his grave. Story 61. Well, I guess this sort of counts. I was bartending when this older lady comes in with her even older husband. It's a bar/disco sort of place, and they get there around midnight when things are starting to get pumping. I think she must have had a few already from where they came from because she is already on it. You can see she sits smack dab on a chair at the middle of the bar while her husband goes off to play billiards. She gets a rum and coke, and then another one, and then a few more. Then out of the blue, she starts accusing me of stealing her phone. "You took my phone, didn't you? Where's my phone?" I kept telling her I didn't take anything and that she must have misplaced it or given it to someone. Lady then proceeds to tell everyone that sits down near her and not so near her that I've taken her phone, thoroughly embarrassing me. The couple stays to the closing of the bar, and she stays around, even with all the lights on, accusing me of stealing her phone, threatening to get management on me. Only when she gets up to go, at the insistence of her husband, do we find that her phone was smashed to pieces at her feet. She must have dropped it and was trying to blame me for it. I still see her now and then here and there, and I don't know if she remembers her behavior, but it always makes me cringe how I was being accused of something I didn't do that night. Story 62. I was on the other side of this once, as the loudmouth not thinking the bartender could hear me. I'm partially deaf, so I sometimes don't know I'm talking loud. I was drunk too, so I was talking louder than normal. But you aren't here for my excuses. So I'm looking at my phone, and my friend comes in from outside. He asks what I was smiling, laughing about, and I said, coworker. Asked when I'm going to give her glass dildo back. As soon as the last word fell out of my mouth, I look and see the female bartender giving me the side eye. I was trying to explain, no, it's a running joke between me and a coworker. And she just says, sure, buddy. And all night kept cracking jokes and saying things like, it's okay, man, I don't judge. Story 63. Just last Friday, I overheard an older couple quietly beginning to argue, but ultimately and absurdly agreed on heading down to the courthouse the following Monday to begin filing for divorce. Then the woman proceeded to say as they were splitting the bill, 14 years. 14 years wasted on your dumbass. Story 64. I once stood by and watched a man have his final moments with his childhood dog over FaceTime in a hotel bar. Apparently the vets were at his house and were putting him down. He seemed to have no idea it was coming and was crying a lot, but generally doing well to keep it together over in the corner of the bar. I walked over, placed a beer and a coffee next to him in silence, and went back to work. About 20 minutes later, he wiped away his tears, gave me a choked back smile, and left. To this day, I genuinely think that man had the worst moment of his life and still wiped it away all just to give that classic bit of British courtesy. The old smile and nod. Story 65. These guys just last night were arguing about who is the greatest single figure in rock and roll for a while. So I mistakenly thought they were real music buffs. The song playing changed a few seconds later to Psycho Killer, Talking Heads. And one of them got excited that, dude, this playlist is awesome. Freaking Elvis. I really wish I could unhear that. Some things are hard to get past. Story 66. My ex used to put plastic over the sheets and piss on me. And threesomes are overrated. One of you just ends up lying there while the other two duck. Same girl then tried to hit on a married stranger. Story 67. Not a bartender anymore. But I overheard a woman tell her friend that they need to leave because someone stole her skirt. It was in a nightclub, so the friend initially misheard it as purse, which made her have to repeat it louder. I politely offered her to go to the Lost and Found for something in the meantime. Unbelievable how much clothing gets left at nightclubs. She agreed and later explained that she had taken it off to go to the toilet and someone had snatched it from under the stall. I'm male, so I don't know if it's normal to take your skirt off to go to the toilet, but it definitely struck me as odd. Story 68. I'd like to just fold that new cart boy into a little card and keep him in my pouch all day. I bartend at a golf course, and the lonely wives come to get drunk on Tuesdays. I do often do double duty on those days. I was the cart boy. Story 69. A couple of Malaysian guys trying to convince my boss to open our bar in Malaysia and talked about the movie they were making about Genghis Khan because apparently one of them used to be Genghis Khan in his past life. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, so I asked how he found out he was Genghis Khan, and he told me it was through his dreams and that he felt a connection when we first shook hands. Told me I was his nephew in his past life. Anyway, they've been inviting us to Malaysia because apparently one of them is Prince. Couldn't find them in Google, and the business cards they gave us were from defunct company based in the UK. Story 70. Bar was pretty quiet on a weeknight, Girl in her 20s comes in by herself and has a few drinks. A guy around her age shortly follows. An hour or so later, the two had engaged in some serious group sex talk. At this point, the liquor was flowing, and I don't think they cared if I heard. Last time I saw them, they were leaving to her apartment for him to get his balls hit by her high heels. This was a quote from both of them, in a non-joking way. I hope his balls turned out okay. Story 71. Used to bartend for a local club. Overheard a husband coming out to his wife that he was gay. The wife, obviously devastated, threw her drink and left. Story 72. A group of mums were out having drinks and didn't realize we could overhear their table from back of house. Happens all the time. I heard one lady talking about her daughter to all the other mums. So I took Lexi to her therapist the other day, and the therapist asked her if there's anything she'd done that she regrets since she's been off her meds, and Lexi said no. So I interrupted and asked if she regretted having sex with that random guy from Tinder. Story 73. I was at the Chili's bar in the evening when this happened. Bartender was making margaritas, and the blender was super loud. Two guys at the bar were talking, and they were slow to adjust the volume of their voices after the blender went off. Nothing vulgar or obscene overheard yet. Bartender makes another drink and the guys are talking. She kills the blender and older guy finishes with, "So you put your tongue inside?" Everything was dead silent. Story 74. Happened a couple of days ago. Two couples were arguing about whose story was more messed up. One had been with their ex-partner for 20 years before they went with the brother, and the other one was about to have a kid with someone who was a family friend of their ex. Was still funny, but in a sick way. Story 75. Ooh, I've got one. I'm a bartender, but this happened while I was serving a table in a fine dining restaurant. Two women, early 20s. When I walked up to take their orders, one of them was telling the other, and that's when I knew he was lying, that he didn't have an STD. Story 76. I work at a restaurant, and our bartender overheard me saying to another coworker that I'm creative and offensive, like handicap adult film. Had to explain that it was a Bo Burnham lyric after I found out she heard me. Story 77. Guy got a BJ at a massage parlor with a Ziploc bag as protection. His friend's reaction was probably similar to yours and mine. Little shock, little scared, kind of amazed, and the resourcefulness. Story 78. Women. Of course, I love my husband, but he's always gone on business. I don't think I have anything to feel guilty about. It was just a kiss. Women too. Okay, I'm done talking about this. You're pissing me off. I mean, come on. This is my daughter's boyfriend we're talking about. Story 79. I got peed on a couple of months ago by an extremely intoxicated man. No one reacted. That was the strangest lack of conversation I've ever heard. Bar conversations are scary. I've learned to avoid listening in to protect myself. Bartenders of Reddit, what is your best way too drunk customer story? Had two regulars that would come in for Bears games like clockwork. Never missed a game in the 2 years I worked there. Nice guys married with kids and working as house painters. One looked like Michael Chiklis. The other looked like Ned from Groundhog's Day. One day they get fall down sloppy and start causing a ruckus. I tell them that they have to clear out and they stumble to the sidewalk. 5 minutes later, everyone in the bar is gathering around the front window. I look out and these two dudes are making out in the middle of Clark Street. Never saw them again. Story 2. I had a drunk customer who could not pay her bill run off and call 911, claiming that I had hit her. My weapon of choice, you ask? A sweet potato french fry. The reaction of the cop, who showed up to look for a blood trail when I told him that the restaurant had discontinued sweet potato fries months ago, was truly priceless. Rock solid alibi. Story 3. Not a bartender, but it was at a bar and it's a good story, so that counts, right? Anyways, I'm sitting at the bar with my girlfriend and a few of her friends. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, around the time the Giants were playing in the World Series. Needless to say, the whole bar was decked out in Giants gear. One particular guy went so far as to paint his toenails black and orange. He's sitting near us, and he's chatting up some of the girls I'm with. He's noticeably wasted, but seems to have a relatively cheery demeanor. I was riding on the Giants high, and in what I thought was a completely lighthearted tone, lean over and say, "Hey dude, nice toenails, go Giants." I assumed anybody who painted their toenails wouldn't mind the attention of someone saying, "Hey, look, you painted your toenails." Boy, was I wrong. He immediately stiffens up as if I had just questioned every aspect of his masculinity. He turns to me and slurs, "I run in Iron Man's, man. You do not want to duck with me." Taken aback, I put my hands up in the universal, non-confrontational gesture and laugh. "Hey man, calm down. I wasn't trying to make fun of you." Watching his face scrunch up in fury, it was clear to me that he still assumed I was making fun of him. I could almost see his alcohol-saturated brain convulsing inside his skull, debating whether or not to take a swing. "You don't believe me, dude. I run ducking Iron Mans. I will tear you the duck apart." He was getting louder and louder with each word. People were starting to notice. I could see the bartenders looking over. I really didn't want to get lumped together with this a whole and get kicked out of the bar for fighting. I couldn't miss a World Series game over this. Bartenders don't tend to ask questions when it comes to that sort of thing. Everyone involved gets thrown to the curb. Thinking on my feet, I quickly said, "Yo, well, I'm a world-class sprinter. I bet I can run around the parking lot and back before you can even get your ass off that stool." His eyes lit up. With a triumphant grin, he stumbles off his stool shouting, "Can't touch this for cent," and bolts straight out the door. I never even moved. He wasn't allowed back in. The bar was at full capacity. Story 4. One night, my bouncer had to kindly ask the guy to not duck his female acquaintance at the bar. The guy took offense and decided to take this classy lady elsewhere, which was fine, but before he walked away, he went to high-five the other bartender who was unaware of the previous whereabouts of the guy's hand. Everything started happening in slow motion. "No!" me and the bouncer yelled as his hand made contact with the bartenders. She shoots me a confused look as I pantomime diddling a girl's fun parts and mouth the words, "He was duck her." The reaction was pretty priceless. Story 5. I once argued with a guy I had cut off for 10 minutes that he was too drunk to stay. The reason? He had ordered one drink, gulped it down, and then puked everything in his belly up onto my bar. He then immediately forgot he had done this and demanded to know where his drink was. Argued with me that I had tossed it when he wasn't looking and that he hadn't thrown up. I had to be like, "There's literally puke on the lapel of your coat right now. Look down." He was stunned. Story 6. I worked at a local bar and 2 regulars came in really drunk and stoned. They ordered beers and just stared into the mirror on the back of the bar. Finally, one of the guys, expressionless, takes his bottle and taps his buddies with it, making it foam all over the bar. The other guy looks down at the beer going everywhere, and just as expressionless, slams his bottle as hard as he can down on the first guy's beer. Glass shatters is all down the bar. About 20 people are hit with glass. It goes into my ice chest as well, which became the biggest issue. They look up at me, still expressionless. I say, "You know you gotta go now." They nod and walk out. Story 7. I was a bartender, but this wasn't when I was bartending. It was my wedding. My wife and I decided that we really wanted to have one hell of a party for our wedding, and somehow we thought having a 7-hour open bar was a good idea. Here are just a handful of the results of such a bacchanal. One guy passed out underneath the urinals, one lady passed out in a stall, one guy vomited on his pregnant wife's shoes in the reception hall, another guy passed out at his table and vomited right in the middle of the reception hall. It got so bad that my best man went on the DJ's mic and said, "People, the bus to the hotel isn't coming back for another 3 hours. Take it easy." And then an hour later, his pants were off and he was dancing with my mom in his underwear. Aftermath story. In the morning, I receive a call from the front desk. The nice fellow asked if I was the bridegroom and wished me many years of happy marriage. He then proceeds to say that the hotel understands that people drink and messes can be made, but this particular room was beyond the pale, and asked if he could charge that room a special cleaning fee because he thought there was blood in the room. I said, "If it's that bad, you do whatever you need to do." My wife asks what the call was about, and I tell her. Being of an inquisitive nature, she asks, "How bad can it be?" So she decides to check it out. As soon as she gets off the elevator, this odor smacks her in the face. She goes down this long hallway to my friend's room, and she is horrified. There is crap, yes, feces, everywhere. There was a sea of crap on the floor of the bathroom. It looked like he had explosive craps that had nearly covered the bathroom floor, save where a circle around the toilet had been unsuccessfully wiped with the bathroom towels. There was a 2-inch wave that had flowed over the room's separator and covered a good portion of the carpeted area of the room. She also mentioned what looked like a hand smear of crap on the blanket on the bed, like a crap had happened. It doesn't seem possible that someone could actually crap that much, but apparently it is. Story 8. Had a guy walk out without paying his tab one night. The credit card he'd used to open the tab turned out to be bunk, so we couldn't do anything about it. Cut to a few weeks later when he and his buddies came back into the bar for drinks. I told him that he'd left a tab open a few weeks before, and he'd have to settle up before I'd serve him anything. He acted put out, but paid the old tab off in cash. Gave me another credit card to open a new one. He and his friends then set in to get wasted and run up another very large tab. During their shenanigans, he thought it would be hilarious to throw his keys at me in an act of defiance. After I dodged the hastily thrown and poorly aimed projectile, I held onto the keys behind the bar. Presumably forgetting what he'd done, he and his friends skipped out on their tab again. And although I had pre-authorized the card when he gave it to me, it wouldn't accept the large tab they had run up. Dumb Git had to come crawling back into the bar when he realized that we still had his keys, and he proceeded to drunkenly beg us to give them back to him. He had to use 2 or 3 different cards to pay off the tab before we would give them back to him. All the while, he was yelling at us for being idiots. He was subsequently permabanned from the bar. TL drunk guy hurls keys at barkeep, pays friends huge tab for their return. Story 9. I worked at a movie theater where we sold wine and beer. This one lady came in and had apparently pre-gamed too much, as well as downing a couple of bottles in the theater. She got the extra bottles from friends because we cut her off a long time before the bottles after she spilled red wine on the floor leaving the counter. Movie is over and she comes stumbling down the walkway, literally bouncing off the railings, and slams a glass of wine into an employee's hands, spilling it all over the employee. She then slams herself into the counter and screamed, "Do you sell wine to go?" We told her no, and she ran off into the projector room because she thought it was the bathroom and vomited blood red wine everywhere. Her husband was absolutely mortified, paid for damages from the puke, and left. That was a bad night for a lot of people. Story 10. I bartend for weddings at a hotel in the city I live. One night, I had the sister of the bride come up and ask if it was fine if she showed me her tits in substitute of a tip. I just laughed it off and made her drink. She then proceeded to pull down the straps from her dress and revealed to me a pair of the nicest tits I have seen. Story 11. I work as a bartender at a pretty big live and cooking buffet, but we occasionally throw big parties for a nice extra bit of cash for the company, which we don't see any of. Anyhow, we had a pretty big 16-plus party that night, and I was bartending with a good friend of mine. It was a fun night. 16-year-olds falling all over the place because they had 3 to 4 beers and such. Decent music, pretty laid-back night of work usually. While the party is at its peak, this guy, probably 17, maybe 16, tries to come up to the bar and strike a conversation with me and my friend. The only thing is, he's quite drunk and has quite some trouble keeping upright. After trying to maintain his balance for a minute or two, he reaches for the bar, which is metal and soaked in beer, after having shoved hundreds of beers over it. The guy wants to put his elbow on the bar with his face on his palms. He uses pretty much his full weight smacking down on the bar, thinking it's safe to lean on. And the moment he does, his elbow speeds off to the side, and he pretty much face plants the bar. It seemed he nearly broke his face, but he acts like nothing really happened, playing it off cool, orders a beer, and leaves. 5 minutes later, he comes back and asks for a supervisor to check him out because he's not feeling too well. Turns out, he broke his nose in 2 places and his left cheekbone. He must have felt it pretty good the next morning. I'm from Holland, BB, hence the reason 16-year-olds can drink beer. Story 12. I work at a hotel bar, so some people tend to drink more than usual since they don't have to drive. Well, one lady was trying to keep up with all her male colleagues. She was going drink for drink and shot for shot with them. It's about closing time when they all start getting ready to leave. The lady stands up and falls face first onto the ground. When one of the guys tries to pick her up, he falls too. Eventually, the manager had to help her walk to her room, where apparently she tried to grope him on the way. She was not attractive. Story 13. I had 2 drunks sitting at the bar, completely hammered. They came in together and were obviously acquaintances, but got into a heated disagreement. Suddenly, one lurches to his feet and, quite nimbly, grabbed his bar stool and swung up back to hit the other one, like an executioner with a sword. None of us moved because he did it so quick and it looked like it would all be over in an instant. But he froze, held his pose for a couple of long seconds, then just toppled over backwards. There was a collective sigh of relief from everyone but the victim, who was also passed out face down on the bar. Story 14. A few years back, guy crapped his pants and was in the pool room most of the night, and the smell was just lingering. Sad thing was, I don't think he was too drunk. He was in the bar with his crafty trousers for like 3 hours, but it was so funny, I just couldn't tell him to leave. When I was bartending at a hotel, a couple sat down at my bar, and it was a first date. The girl he was with was very pretty, stuck up and snobby. He was kind of chubby, not really attractive, but still seemed like a solid guy. I purposely helped him get her drunk so he could get laid. Free shots, extra strong drinks. I don't know if that makes me a good person or not. Also, when I tended bar at a yacht club, the boaters would pay me anywhere from $100 and $300s to take them out on their boats after hours because they were too intoxicated. Best job ever. I would never speak of the strippers to their wives, though. Story 15. A few years back, I was a bartender at a local pool hall. At the end of my shift, if people were around, I would lock the door and have a few drinks with them before going home. This particular night, 2 buddies showed up just before closing and were hammered. They had been out on one of their big-ass Black Russian nights. They would bar hop all night trying to see who could get the largest Black Russian served to them. The doors were locked, and they were hounding me to make them drinks as no one had gotten a larger drink than the other. Deciding that I needed to sober them up before I served them any more drinks, and deciding that I clearly needed some entertainment. I set up a rather large obstacle course as a race to see who would get the large Black Russian and win the night. These 2 were very good friends and very competitive, of course drunk as well. The obstacle course soon turned into a full contact sport, including a body slam and a chair being thrown at the other. The winner ended up playing air guitar solos of Bon Jovi all night on one of the pool tables. Wins all round. Story 16. I've been a bartender at topless adult clubs for most of the past 9 years. Got a bunch of stories. I saw a drunk and likely high guy come behind our bar and grab our knife that we use for cutting limes. He was holding it to his own head and his friend came over to try and talk him down. He then hit his friend. We had this regular, a really nice guy, tipped well, was super polite, but he used to get pretty drunk. One day he was sitting at a high table and falling asleep in his chair. He would start sliding off the chair, then startle himself awake for a couple minutes. I told the bouncer to get him out, but he ignored me. 2 minutes later, drunk regular slides all the way out of his seat. He tries to grab the table to keep from falling and ends up on the ground with this heavy table upside down on top of him. I never saw him again. But my favorite just happened this past Halloween. We had decorated the bar with fake cobwebs and other Halloween decorations. A very drunk, very young customer decided to get a lap dance from one of the girls. I don't know how it happened, but by the end of the dance, he was entirely tangled in the cobwebs. Looking over, all I could see was his hands flailing as he tried desperately to get out. I have never laughed so hard in my life. The bouncer finally had to cut him free with a knife, and it was just in time. As soon as he was freed, the kid ran to the bathroom and puked. Story 17. One of my favorite customers, actually. He was a 60-year-old, mostly retired contractor that grew up in the small, busy town I'm from. He was filthy rich and kept a few summer homes in the Bahamas, which he would travel to with his own planes. He was pretty lecherous with the waitresses, but seemed to have some real regard for me. He didn't leer or make jokes about my tits. We would talk about NPR, politics, and the like. Very pleasant man, but intensely opinionated. Much of the time, I would smile and agree. I will always remember his drink of choice. 2 Coronas and a shot of Jaeger, which he thought was some strange form of whiskey. I would not have you thinking that this is what he drank in one night. This is what we would set before him when he sat down, and again when he asked for another round. On a very busy night, he came in and sat with me at the bar. He was already drunk, but he's the sort of person who would be dead if he was sober. I looked to my boss, who indicated I should serve him, and so I did. The man drank with a fever. We served him the special that night, ossobuco, with garlic mashed potatoes and sautéed rapini. We were trying to sober him up, or at least keep him maintained, but he was too far gone. By the end of his meal, his face was dripping in meat juice and mashed potatoes. His skin was beet red from the tips of his fingers to his nose. He was slobbering, messy, and grunting. He looked around like a confused, deaf mastiff whenever somebody spoke to him. We let him leave. I wouldn't be telling this story if it actually had a haunting ending. He actually managed to drive his truck without killing anybody to another restaurant, one of the more famous in town, with a long, long history of good food and drinking. I heard he spent a few hours drinking there before he tried to go home. He attempted to drive, hit a cop car, and a light pole before falling out of his very tall truck, waving his arms in the air and saying, "You got me." He wasn't allowed to drive after that, but I would see him riding his recumbent bicycle around town. He would wave to me and I to him, and that was the last we saw each other. I think he's been in the Bahamas ever since. Story 18. Not a bartender, but I was a cashier at an all-night convenience store. This guy walks in, completely plastered, wearing a hoodie with one of those huge front pockets. He goes over to the fridge, suspicious-like, and starts so slyly stuffing the pocket with frozen burritos. Meanwhile, I'm watching the whole thing unfold, not even subtly staring at him, but he keeps peeking my way and then looking away and snickering like he's Thomas Crown. Finally, he takes a burrito to the microwave, unwraps, pops it in, starts her up and waits for it to finish. He brings the warmed burrito over to the counter, snickering all the while, and pays for it. I charge him $34.90 for the burrito, plus the 9 other burritos in his pocket. He looks at the register, then back at me, then back to the register, then to me, and says, "That's an expensive burrito. You're lucky I'm so hungry." He pays and leaves. The thing that makes me laugh the most is the idea that he woke up the next morning with a hoodie full of melted burritos, most likely. Toldar drunk tried to steal burritos. I charged him the total for all burritos for the one he actually bought. Story 19. Not so much a drunk story, but my most memorable. I used to bartend in a very seedy dive bar, and the owner got tired of people doing substances in our bathroom, specifically Coke on the tanks of the toilets. So he ended up putting WD-40 on all the surfaces that might possibly have enough room to lay out a line of Coke. It only took one night before these 2 really drunk escort come stumbling out of the bathroom, covered in blood from massive nosebleeds. They were stumbling and pissed, slinging blood everywhere, and grabbing everything that wasn't nailed and threw it across the bar as they left. I miss that job sometimes. Story 20. Worked as a barback through college on a boat that was turned into a club just off campus between 2 colleges. They were introducing Red Bull to date this event. My boss decided to sell it for $1 shots mixed with Bacardi 151. We sold hundreds. By 10:30, they were closing it down. The bartender chick was on top of the bar, spraying club soda into the crowd from the gun. The other bartender jumped over the bar into the madness to break up a fight. The bouncer, 6'5", 350 subs, versus 8 drunken dudes. It was like watching the Discovery Channel when a pack of lions take down an elephant. There was extreme counts of puking, ducking, and fighting happening all around, all at once. I vividly remember pushing this guy off of a girl who was bent over a bar stool puking. I didn't see her face, but I saw the dude's face that was standing behind her. This drunken duckwad was sticking his junk in her while she was duck. Needless to say, he was knocked out, courtesy of a bottle of Jaquin's vodka. At that point, I'd realized that whatever happened from this point on was fair game. The laws of the wild. The cops came around 10:50-ish to help get everyone out and off the boat. There was so much puke and trash and glass all over the ground. We had to squeegee the whole boat. It was hands down the greatest bar night of my life. Imagine if you brought pirates to a wild, wild west bar and got them all drunk and let them brawl. Anyway, if you have any questions, ask away. Been behind a bar since I was 17. Story 21. May have missed the boat here, but this is a way too drunk story that wound way out of control and ended up being one of the scariest nights of my life. I bartended for a couple years in college at one of the more popular pubs. The night of the incident, there was a massive snowstorm and many of the main roads were closed, so the crowd was comprised of mostly townie regulars. One of them, we'll call him John, would occasionally come on to me when he was super drunk and was making an excessive display of affection, even by his standards. He was the drunkest I've ever seen him, and his pickup attempts quickly disintegrated to spiteful mutterings and insults. I was kind, but tried my best to disregard his comments and busied myself with cleaning or helping other customers. Since he was so drunk and he kept ordering his vodka drinks, I would substitute alcohol for seltzer water and make the drink on the house. This was one of my favorite tactics to avoid cutting somebody off, which is always embarrassing and almost never ends well. After politely declining another slurred, angry request to go home with him, John cracks. He smashes his glass on the ground and starts slinging any insult he can muster through his drunkenness. I calmly tell him it's time for him to leave, and with a look from the bouncer, John storms out of the bar on his own accord. Shortly after, around 1 a.m., another bartender I work with receives a phone call from John's roommate. They shared some mutual friends. He says that John came home in a rage, crying and screaming about some Karen got his shotgun and butcher knife from his room and ran from the house. We could only presume he was on the way to our bar. But my manager, being a super low-key guy, refused to be alarmed and call the police. Even so, he asked the few customers that were still there to call it an early night, and we locked down the bar. All of us working did our closing duties and stayed in the bar until daybreak. We drank and socialized, but not without severe tension and the unspoken reason why none of us left at the usual 3 a.m. I made it home safe and didn't see John until years later in a grocery store, where he showed no sign of recognizing me. We really never found out where he went, or what he was doing with his weapons during a snowstorm at 1 in the morning, or what his intentions were. I like to think he had planned on night hunting after the bars all along. Anticlimactic ending to the story, I'm sorry, but not really. Story 22, first occurrence. I was working a typical Saturday night, real busy, and this woman that I'm serving keeps pulling me over to her and getting really touchy. I didn't think too much of it because she was clearly pretty drunk, but I'm not really into it considering she is 42, I'm 21, and weighs 300 libs. She starts telling me that I really should duck some older women, clearly talking about herself. I should also note that her husband is sitting right next to her. She leaves, nothing happened that night. 3 days later, she comes in with her friend. This time, she is much more flirty and touchy. She starts talking to me about how to please a real woman and that I need to do HJ. At this point, I'm really wishing she was about 170 clubs lighter. I go on serving someone else, but when I come back to her, she slides her phone across the bar to me and tells me to press play. I do as I'm told to see a 5-minute video of her do BJ or her husband. Story 23. I've got another one. My bar manager was a cheeky Brit who didn't take crap from anybody. There was a night where we had a birthday party book out our private room, get exceedingly drunk, and in the process get our staff pretty wasted. They had a ton of balloons set around the room, and as my manager has a young daughter, he decided to take them home for her. Jump to the end of the night. After some post-shift drinks, we all decide to head out. We tell my manager that he should definitely not be riding his electric scooter home. Guy doesn't give a duck, but he's not taking any of that nonsense. He proceeds to tie probably 25 helium balloons to the back of his scooter, try to get on it, and knock it over. Said bar is located in the middle of the entertainment district, so cops are abundant. A cruiser rolls by and stops to make sure everything is okay. At this point, my manager has a cigarette in his mouth, his helmet balanced atop his head, and is seated on his balloon-adorned scooter ready to go, while a coworker and myself try to convince him to walk or cab the short distance home. Cop gets out of the car, and there's some belligerence from my manager as the cop talks to him. Something along the lines of C. What you doing there, sir? Having a smoke mate, the duck doesn't matter? C. Not planning on riding that home, are you? Nah, just decorated it with some balloons to see if I could float off. See. All right, well, I'll be around the area, so it'll probably be best you do float home or find another way, but riding might cause you some trouble, something along those lines. Anyways, cruiser pulls away, and my manager immediately revs his scooter, cute, and bolts after the cops, balloons in tow, smoke in mouth, helmet undone, and eyes ablaze. The cop hasn't gone far and is only about 50 feet down the street, so my manager catches up quickly, proceeds to finger the cop, lose control, swerve, and not so much crash, but flop the scooter onto the side of the road. The cop stopped, made sure he was okay, and then waited for us to run over. They asked if any of us was sober enough to drive the scooter home. Nope. Laughed, and said that if we got him into a cab home ride, then he could go home and we could lock the scooter at work. We all agreed, but my manager would not leave without the balloon, so he untied them all, and we flagged down a cab, put his scooter upright, and watched as his cab disappeared into the night with balloons trailing from the window. He doesn't remember much of it, and was no longer my manager a few months later. Story 24. Not a bartender, but between school and university, spent 6 months in Banff, working as a sandwich artist. Yes, you read that correctly, that was our actual title, in Subway. One evening, club turnout time around 2:33 a.m. Drunk guy enters with his girlfriend. Now this guy is out of his mind drunk, and proceeds to lock himself in the customer toilet. Girl freaks out, and I proceed to unlock the door with a quarter. Open the door to find this guy unconscious on the toilet and trousers around his ankles, vom all over himself and the floor around him, with his John Thomas on show for the whole queue to see, much to their amusement. Anyway, girl goes in and shuts the door behind her. 10 or 15 minutes later comes out helping her boyfriend, who is now just about managing to put one foot in front of the other, slams a $100 bill down on the counter, and leaves without saying / ordering anything. Story 25. I was the cash bar and Red Bull bartender at a St. Patty's Day party. We had something like 400 people at this party, and there was this one lady who decided she liked looking at me. She kept coming back for shots of vodka. Now, because it was a big party, my manager had said, unless the person was belligerent, we should just keep serving. I disagreed, but I knew most of the people to be fairly intelligent about their drinking, as most were regulars at my bar, so I just kept serving. Anyway, so this lady must have had 12 shots of vodka at this point. She holds up a $20 and says, "This is yours if you will give me a kiss." I was as polite as I could be and told her that there was a line of customers behind her. I had to serve. But if she wanted to come back later, I can get you another drink and maybe some water. So she left, but lo and behold, she made her way back for shots 13, 14, and 15. Luckily, she didn't remember her odd request, but slipped a couple 20s in my tip jar. Later that night, I found out that she was found upside down and headfirst in a trash can at the end of the night. She was ugly before, but she was even worse, wearing a helmet of wet vomit. Story 26. Obligatory. I'm not a bartender, but I work in a bar. Guy is pretty well known around as a heavy drinker and can't handle it. Gets liberally overserved. Pretty much passes out face first on the bar. This is before close. He's still there, after I'm chasing out the stragglers, reminding them that if they want more beer, they have to go home first. This guy's just comatose on the bar. But I figured he was the bartender, or the bar manager's job. I proceeded to pack up the live sound rig and generally do my duties cleaning up. Everyone else in the bar does the same. Barbacks washing glasses while shooting sideways glances at Mr. Party Animal. Quitting time rolls around, and every job in the place to be done after close is done. Literally every chair but the one he was in is turned up on top of the table/bar. Finally, the guy's roused and pretty much told in his stupor he needs to GTFO. We're locking the door and don't have time to deal with his crap, brewing him coffee, and so forth. I probably should have said something, but I don't touch the booze. This was not my duck up. Instead, I load out and head to my car. I pull into the cars, lining up to leave, and hear the van parked directly to my driver's side fire up. Duck. Guy threw it in reverse without looking. Plowed my car. I desperately try to move out of his way, but I'm blocked on all sides. He actually pulls forward. Goes, "Huh, that's weird, let's try that again." And this time plows by driver's rear door. Long story short, his insurance covered it, and I learned that if I see bullcrap happening, I need to be the bad guy and ruin someone's day by calling them out both for getting too drunk and for over-serving. Story 27. I have been working in a pub in Scotland for nearly 3 years now. This is the story of the strangest customer I've had. It was a Tuesday early in the afternoon. This woman in her late 30s comes in with luggage and a laptop bag and orders half a Stella and a nip of Talisker. There wasn't many other customers, so I got talking to her. Christ, do I regret that? She tells me she's just arrived back from LA. Pretty cool, thinks I. Then I noticed a couple things. She claims to be back after 10 years, but with absolutely no tan or accent at all. She also told me she had sold a screenplay to Richard Gere. She continues to drink the half pint and nip for about an hour when a group of Americans walk in. Now, no offense to the sophisticated American Redditor, but these guys were almost like cowboys. Their accent was thick, Southern America, and were loud as fuck. This woman starts talking to them, and they let her join them at a table. These guys stay with her for roughly 45 minutes and bought her plenty booze, 4 double Taliskers and a pint and a half of Stella. Then all the guys slowly start shuffling away from the table towards the door, making crazy gestures at me. I stand on my tiptoes to look at the table and see the woman openly sobbing. I send over my female supervisor because, well, I'm crap at making women stop crying. Between sobs, the woman starts trying to tell my supervisor that she needs to contact her partner in America. Since we are quiet, my supervisor takes her to the orange phone shop to get her phone sorted, and then chuck her in the taxi. Once the phone dilemma is sorted, she tries to put her in a taxi when the woman says, "Come home with me. Come home with me." My supervisor tells her she can't for obvious reasons and manages to get her address out of her. She then says, "Come home with me or I'm going to hit myself." My supervisor pretty much chucks her in a taxi, tells the driver the address and legs it back to the pub where she tells us everything. The boss phones the police and asks if they can investigate. They go to the address and nobody answers. Turns out she's well known to the police for trying to date abuse women. Still don't know what she said to the Americans. Story 28. Oh man, I've got a good one. I bartended in Chicago, and this last summer, the block my bar is on was having a huge street fest. No cars, booze, booths, and corn on the cob everywhere. There were drunks all day. Cut to late in the night. Most of the drunkies have toddled off to bang or barf or whatever most befits them. Our kitchen is closed, and most of the bar is emptying out. One of our cooks went downstairs to change and came back upstairs with his face completely white and says, "There's somebody passed out in the basement. There's blood and chocolate cake everywhere. Instantly, tell everyone the bar is closed and they need to go home. Call the cops and ambulance." Turns out, some drunk goon somehow toddled into our employees-only basement, got into one of the freezers, and began to go beast mode on a mostly frozen chocolate cake, then bashed his head and bled everywhere, then fell asleep. The EMTs made sure he was all right, then wheeled him off in a Hannibal Lecter-style gurney to keep him upright as he puked all the way out of the restaurant. If the cook hadn't found him, guarantee you he'd be dead. The follow-up to the story? It's a big basement, and one of our servers was storing his Vespa down there. When I helped him bring it upstairs, we found chocolate cake all over the handlebars. Drunk Git tried to ride a scooter in the basement. "Man, I'm glad it needs keys," told her. Drunk guy passes out in our basement, covered in blood and chocolate cake. Story 29. I'll preface by saying that I work in a dive karaoke bar. Karaoke 7, yes, 7 nights a week. The wood paneling ensures that I have no illusions about where I work, but we have medical and dental, so duck it. Just 2 weeks ago, I was working Monday night when a girl came in, whom we had lovingly nicknamed Crap Show over the past few months, as she drunkenly left with many of our regulars halfway through the night day. I find it horrifying that I inadvertently have better records on people's sex lives in this town than Planned Parenthood. She was already loaded, and I told her boyfriend of the week that she was under no circumstances allowed in. She needs to stay tied to the bench out front. He explains that they aren't together anymore. Great. She's here, stalking him. Now I have a domestic issue. After she was told she wasn't welcome, I decided to ignore her until I couldn't anymore. She was giving out mini bottles of vodka in front of the bar, so I went to intercede. I pointed out the camera on her and her stupidity, which escalated very quickly into a yelling match, where I called her out on doing substances in the alley last Saturday, treating STDs like Pokemon cards, being a child of the sewer, stuff like that. Now we're in a standoff. She refuses to leave because her beloved Schwilly, that's what he calls himself, Urban Dictionary it, is inside, and she's threatening to defecate in the ashtrays, then proceeds to drop her pants and put her booty on the glass. Oh, and she was crab walking around on the sidewalk for a bit there, and I'm fake called the police once. That usually intimidates them enough, but not her. Then I actually called them. They had a long talk with her as I filled out a trespassing form. 3 hours later, she just walks in and sits down at the bar. Cops again, but this time they hadn't had time to file the previous report and had changed shifts. So when I flashed them my copy of the trespassing paperwork, they ran after her as she successfully fled from them. That was just a Monday. I'm trying to get my boss to email me the security footage highlights he edited together right now. Story 30. Girl at the bar had a few too many, decided to end the night by taking a shot of tequila before they left. Took the shot. Without the glass leaving her lips, puked back up into it. Needless to say, it was also all over the bar and herself. I signal a door guy and back to get her out and clean it up. The bouncer comes up to her and tells her it's time to go home. She slurs just after I finish my drink and nightcaps her own vomit back in her mouth. I couldn't stop laughing. Story 31. I wasn't a bartender, but I worked at a grocery store for about a year and a half. Living in a small town, everyone knew who I was and had no problem with a minor selling alcohol to them because I always had an adult by my side. Well, the one time an adult was not with me. An older gentleman entered the store and it was quite obvious he was liquored up. He stumbled his way over to the liquor aisle and picked up some Crown Royal. When he got to the counter, I rung up the alcohol and looked him over. He was obviously old enough, so I named the price and he tried handing me a food stamp card. Needless to say, you can't buy alcohol with food stamps. When I told him, he tried arguing with me and tried grabbing me. I back away and he tried coming into the cashier's corner. I, of course, denied his wish and he began swinging at me. Thankfully, my manager was there to save my ass. My manager kicked him out and sent me home. Story 32. I had a regular who was a midget. He would always order 7 and 7 talls, which I found hysterical. He was obnoxious and pretentious, and if his steak was cooked properly, he would wave a $20 in the air and loudly proclaim he wanted to tip the cook. One night, he got really drunk and began proclaiming, "I may be a little guy, but I got the biggest idiot in here." I told him to shut up, and he began laughing so hard he fell off the stool. A much longer drop when you are 3 feet tall. In the end, I wound up carrying him like a baby. I was a 27-year-old girl carrying a midget. It was one of the best nights of my life. Story 33. I used to work at a bar on a lake, and people would come out and spend the entire day on their yachts, and then come back to my bar in the evening and get even more drunk. Most of them were regulars, so I knew they would just be going to sleep on their yachts and wouldn't be driving. One day, this guy who was new to the pier got so drunk that he tried to pay his $100 tab with his insurance card. I had to argue with him for 5 minutes, I kid you not, before finally his wife intervened and told him that it wasn't his credit card. The guy ended up falling in the lake that night. I was silently satisfied. Story 34. This one wasn't exactly a drunken customer story. This was a job applicant who had a few beverages before his job interview. At the interview, there were about 4 of us who worked at the bar, sitting there as an interview panel, while the applicants sat nervously under spotlights on the dance floor. One of the questions on our list was, "If you're a regular here, tell us about something crazy that's happened in the bar that you think the staff didn't know about." He squirms for a minute, obviously debating what to tell us. Finally, he spends 5 minutes acting out a scene with him and a few of his friends early on a Saturday night who were sitting and having some pitchers of draft. He said that a girl and a guy were sitting at the next table. He was running around demonstrating this as he explained the story. And eventually they all watched this girl give the guy a handjob under the table. He stopped there and looked at us expectantly. We stared at him for a minute. Then I said, "Well, that's probably not very out of the ordinary." He looked back at me for about 5 seconds, then said, "Yeah, but it turned me on so much that I went right to the bathroom and get it off." We hired him on the spot. Story 35. I cut off a drunk patron at my bar, and he claimed he was perfectly fine and would prove it to me. I let him outside and told him to walk in a straight line while using the crosswalk as a reference. He drunkenly stumbled a couple feet. Then he got cocky and jumped in the air while pulling a 180. He did that a second time and almost got hit by an ambulance that was driving by. He walked back up to me expecting a pat on the back and a free drink. I just told him to go home instead. Story 36. Well, I'm not, nor have I ever been a bartender. I do have a story involving a bartender. I lived in San Francisco at the time and had actually just turned 21. My friends thought it would be funny for me to only order the drink Sex on the Beach at every bar we went to. I had probably 9 to 10 by the time we got to the last bar. I went outside to have a cigarette, and one of the bartenders was out there. We struck up a conversation, and this lady comes over. Now, I was pretty inebriated at this point, so I do not remember what we were talking about, but I do remember asking the girl to kiss me. The girl looks over at the bartender, who just shrugged. So me and said lady start kissing. I get aggressive and practically bear hug her. The bartender starts laughing at me. I said, "What?" At which point, he admitted the girl was his wife. Now, for some reason, I freaked out and thought I was going to get my ass kicked. So without saying a word, I turn around and start climbing the fence behind me. Needless to say, I failed pretty hard and ended up failing on my ass on the other side. Next thing you know, I'm looking at a brand new Mercedes AMG and decided it would be the perfect place to urinate. I pissed all over the front hood and windshield. To this day, I can still go back to that bar, and the bartender will give me free drinks for pissing on the bar owner's car. Story 37. Barely being able to stand, finally getting everyone out, trying to sweep the same spot for 30 minutes, staring at all my checks, wondering how to use a calculator, throwing said calculator, and finally falling asleep in a booth. Oh, did you mean customers? Story 38. I was coming in on the night shift on a Friday afternoon, 5 p.m. One of the first things I see is a customer sitting at a corner bar seat with a cowboy hat worn low, covering his eyes. He was already cut off and was waiting for a cab that was called for him. This was good, as I thought I wouldn't have to deal with him. Well, 5 minutes after I start my shift, he starts muttering loudly weird stuff like, "Ducking Jerome," or "God damn it." I was just hoping for the cab to get there soon. After 10 minutes, he decided to scream at the top of his lungs in a high-pitched voice, "Idiot!" There was music playing, but everybody just gave a death glare over to the guy. Now me, I covered up my face with my shirt and walked into the back so nobody would see me laughing. I walked right back out and escorted him out of the bar and sat him against a wall until the cab arrived. Story 39. When I was 20, I managed to score a job at a bar that my group of friends frequented. Well, there was this one night when this fairly pretty girl showed up. Throughout the night, I noticed this girl kept flirting with all my buddies and was tossing out her number like nobody's business. Now, normally I don't give a crap and fully encourage drunk chicks to talk to my buddies, but Karen was manipulating my drunk friends to buy her drinks throughout the night. By the end of the night, she was loaded and thought she was the queen of the bar. She honestly believed that every man was curled around her little pinky and would do whatever she wanted. Eventually, the last call was made and the lights start to come on. It is at this point that this chick looks me in the eyes, winks, and seductively walks towards me. I see this and see already what's coming. She gets to the bar, leans over, and in a sultry voice says, "What does a girl have to do to get one last drink?" Figuring this was coming, I lean in so we are a few inches away and stare her straight in her eyes and say as sexily as a man can, "Baby, you are so gorgeous, you can have anything you want." She does a fake giggle and acts surprised. "Really?" Still staring in her eyes, I say, "No, we are closed. Now get the duck out my bar." Her expression was priceless. The best part is that my roommate took her home that night, and she totally blue-balled him. So when I was home watching TV and unwinding after work, I was the first person she saw when he told her to get the duck out. Tell DR, told a girl who was manipulating my buddies to get out of my bar, only to find out my buddy took her home and told her to get out of our house. Story 40. Not a bartender, but I worked as a doorman at a club many years ago. One night, there were a group frat guys there in the crowd and one really drunk cross-dressing male. At some point, the cross-dresser starts chatting up the drunkest of the frat guys. The other frat guys are snickering and trying not to give anything away because they obviously wanted to see how far it would go. Well, the two eventually go into the women's bathroom to make out. We had to go in after them, obviously. My friend/coworker pointed at the drunk frat guy and said, "You can't be in here." Then at the cross-dresser and said, "And neither can you." The frat guy got a confused look on his face and had to be explained why the other girl he was making out with could not be in there. Guy immediately starts puking all over the place. The cross-dresser gets pissed and starts throwing punches at the other doorman, who then picked him up and carried him all the way outside, throwing him into a snowbank. He left the club, yelling how we were all going to be in big trouble because he was ducking the mayor of the city and had lots of connections and we were going to regret what we did. Never saw him, her again. Story 41. Shortish version since I'm on my phone. Customer orders a bunch of drinks, and when I tell him the price, he just says, "Duck you," and walks off. I was too busy to really do anything about it, but our promoter was right there when it happened. This was his party, mostly his people, so he asks if I want the guy kicked out. I say sure, and the promoter goes after the guy. BTW, our promoter, was roughly 6'5", 350 pounds. So he removes the guy and brings him outside, basically to where our entrance line is. So a whole customer wants to talk to a manager, my best friend and roommate, and says that I instigated the problem. My manager basically calls the a-hole a liar. Well, this guy gets pissed and makes a move toward him. Our huge promoter's right there and swoops the guy up by his throat and slams him on the hood of a car, think Undertaker, and squeezes for just a bit. When he lets the guy go, the guy starts yelling about how he's gonna be back with his friends to duck us all up. Fast forward an hour and he returns with a few buddies. He goes straight for our head of security, a huge Tungan man, calling him a beaner. At this particular moment, our head security had a group of his nephews, all massive Polynesian, hanging next to him, about to enter the club. They immediately intervene and offer the a-hole and his buddies a 10-second head start and start counting down. The a-hole customer, who told me to duck off, my manager to duck off, tried to attack my manager, came back to start a fight and throw racial slurs around, ended up unconscious, stripped to his underwear, left in the planking position under a truck. It was excessive, but the a-hole really strung some bad decisions together to end up where he did. Story 42. Crazy, I just found this. My girlfriend is a bartender and was just telling me a story about someone we both know from her bar. Let's call her Miss Drinkstomach. Miss Drinkstomach came in and did her normal drinks, usually about 10 shots of vodka, all with beer backs and a few various mixed drinks within a time span of an hour or two. So as the story was told to me, she tried to call her boyfriend to see if he wanted sexy time, but he was asleep. So she decided to storm down to his house, literally walking in the middle of busy roads and yelling at cars to get the duck out of her way. Eventually the popo come, and instead of dropping her off in the drunk tank, they dropped her off at a friend's house. More drinks ensue, and soon she continues her original mission. She gets to her boyfriend's house to find him asleep. As the story was told to me, by her boyfriend. She threw a Chuck Norris kick to my face to wake me up. I knew she was smashed, so I was trying to get her to take a shower so she would maybe sober up. She had then asked, "Where's a ducking bottle at?" There was none. So she grabbed a box cutter lying on a window and hit her wrist and started drinking in hopes to get drunk. The rest of the night ended in her going to the hospital, and last we heard, she got admitted to a psychotic ward. Story 43. I'm a server at a bar/restaurant in Atlanta. One night, one of our regulars had a bit much to drink and he fell down and hit his head on the ground. So the manager called an ambulance because he was acting a bit strange. They came, and after evaluation, the situation, they said he needed to go to bed. No concussion or anything serious. Well, we didn't want to call a cab because of how drunk he was, and not really knowing, one, if he had money, and two, not know where he lived. He's there every day, so the decision was made to drive him home. Mistake. We got his ID and asked him, "Is this where you live?" He affirmed yes. So we drive there and say, "Is this your house?" He says yes. The door's open. So one of us helps him inside the house. They are trying to find his room when a man naked with a gigantic pit bull, luckily not a pistol, starts screaming, "What the duck are you doing in my house?" Luckily, he was able to explain his way out of the situation, and they come back to the car. So we call the cops and they look up his address in the system. The cops somewhat know the guy, so they do him a huge favor and take him to the address after asking him if this is correct. The same thing happens, not his house. So they bring him back because they don't want to take him to jail because he's a teacher of special needs children. They decided eventually to take him to jail when we asked him if he lived on Mars, which he responded, "Yes, yes, Mars, that is it," in Austin Powers' voice. Needless to say, he can't come to our bar any longer, at least to drink. Story 44. The cook where I used to work had a sports bottle full of wine all the time. We would put the outdated wine in a bin and he would take the bin out every day. So he had an endless supply of 3 to 4 day old wine. This stuff is pretty yummy, really. The oxidation adds a nice complexity to the wine. Anyways, I gave him a ride home most days due to him not being able to drive. One day I could not find him anywhere. So I sat down at the bar for dinner and 1-2 beers. I figured that he would show up before too long. He did not. So I guessed that he had got a ride home and headed out. Walking up to my truck, I saw something under it and realized that it was the missing cook. He was sleeping between the back and front wheels on the passenger side. If I had not seen him under the truck, he would have been ran over. I'm pretty sure starting the truck would have not woke him by how difficult it was to get him to wake up and get into the truck. Story 45. I had a drunk guy at my bar one night. I refused him service and gave him coffee. He was quiet and didn't bother the customers in the restaurant, so no big, right? The bar eventually filled up, and Serter Drunkenstein calls me over. I leaned across the bar and said, "What's up?" He leans to me and says, slurs, "I'm going to stab you in the neck, and then I'm going to hit these people sitting next to me." I walked around the bar, talking to him. He stood up, and as I backed him out the door, I said, "You can try to stab me, but if you hurt anyone else, I will make sure that you suffer." One of my regulars, a cop, saw that something was up and followed, calling the popo as we walked. We got outside, and Sir D sits on the curb. Local Leos arrived and brought him to the Hooskow for the night. After I got back inside, I damn near pissed myself. Story 46. I was working at a super busy bar in Cincinnati one night. One of those bars that wrap the whole wall. You could easily fit 30 people across it. Well, anyway, we were slammed, and in my ear, all I heard was caroning and complaining. It's a bar, so the stench of alcohol is already in the air, making it somewhat difficult to exactly pinpoint what loudmouthed git wouldn't stop. The manager was nowhere to be found, probably flirting with one of the local bar escorts that frequented the location. You know the kind, in the dead of winter, but yet dresses like it is June, focused with the ultimate goal of not paying for a drink all night, then leaving some broke poor git to another night of internet adult film. But anyway, the yelling wouldn't stop. Just shut up and let me do my thing. All I'm trying to do is make a drink for a couple friends and myself. Next thing I know, there's 3 cops wanting my attention, and I was like, holy crap, didn't realize the cops could order a beer while in their uniforms. They looked like they needed a couple shots because, boy, they didn't seem happy. I figured I'd show up with 3 shots of vodka, maybe a beer or 2, and I'll get these guys partying. Next thing I know, I'm slammed in handcuffs and I'm getting some kind of lecture about how I wasn't supposed to be behind the bar and that I didn't work there. And they said I was drunk. Story 47. Oh, to start, I had one quiet guy at the end of the bar for most of the night. Polite, quiet, good tipper. Let's call him GGG. I worked at a bar in Brooklyn, Illinois. It was probably around 1:30 on a Friday night, also known as amateur hour. Some crust punk and his haggy, dread-haired slam piece walked in and ordered duckin' 7 beers and shots, Sid and Nancy style. I'd usually happily oblige and take their money. However, we had recently been wrist-slapped for not carding, and so I asked for IDs. Sid immediately busts out a political duck the system rant, while Nancy proceeds to try and knock all of the beer taps forward. At this point, I'm busy behind a 25-seat bar, and all I can do is try to signal my bouncer to get these holes out. The Karen climbs over the bar and starts trying to drink from said knocked-over taps. I couldn't believe it. My bar back is AFK and I'm basically about to cry. Then I see him. Good guy comes behind Sid, grabs his hair along with Nancy's, and knocks their skulls together. Nancy is knocked out cold. Sid starts mumbling nonsense, tries to stand up, pukes on Nancy, and passes out on top of her. It was worth cleaning up for the extra hour. Thanks, Geekog. Story 48. Well, we aren't allowed to serve people who are really drunk. If they're drunk and look like they'd start a fight, we cut them off sooner rather than later. The other night, on a quiet Friday evening, that period between dinner and partying hard, a group of reasonably boisterous men came in. One guy ordered for them, and I really just couldn't tell if he had a bit of a lisp or if he was pretty drunk. So I asked how much he'd had to drink tonight. We try and do this with a big smile so it's not confrontational. He asked why, and I replied that he seemed a little drunk. His response was to throw his hands up in the air and bellow, "Well, no ducking crap, lady," before practically pissing himself, laughing. He was clearly hammered. I refused to serve him, and his friends all tried to convince me that this was bad business, and we'd make no money that way. Funnily enough, still more than we would if we were shut down and lost our liquor license, before leaving rather amiably. It's not a great story, but the lesson is that if a bartender asks you how much you've had to drink, you lie. If you're wasted, we won't serve you anyway. If you say a couple of beers at the rugby and we're not sure, we'll probably believe you unless we see behavior that is better evidence of your intoxication, like yelling about how wasted you are. Story 49. I worked at a Ruby Tuesday off of I-95, and an old man from Florida stopped in for some weekday daytime beers. He proceeds to make light conversation about FL politics and his ex-wife. I humored him for as long as I could stand and excused myself to restock glasses. Now, the restaurant's silent alarm was built into the bar, and the rack of glasses I plopped on the bar must have triggered it. About 15 minutes later, 2 local cops pull up with their lights on. The old guy turns as I point out the fuzz, and he proceeds to get all riled up as they walk in. "Ducking cops, always trying to stir up some crap," he says. One of the cops says, "Excuse me?" The guy says, "You ducking cops are always in my business," and proceeds to rant about Jeb Bush and his ex-wife and cops and his kids, yelling and causing quite the ruckus for an old man. The cops seemed kind of shocked that this geezer was making such a scene and tried to calm him down, but the old man kicked his bar stool out from under him and yells, "You mother duckers, I ain't going back to jail." The law descended upon him and dragged him out kicking and screaming. After they had him contained, one of the officers came back in to inquire about the silent alarm. I think it was a Wednesday morning shift, not even noon. Story 50. When I worked as a waiter for a high-priced country club, one customer, after about 24 vodka tonics, asked my manger to get him to Long Beach Airport because he wanted to go Vegas. Long story short, my manger told me to drive him to Long Beach 45-min drive in his car, and he ordered a private plane. On the ride there, I kept asking him, "Are you sure you want to do this?" He came back and said, "Bro, what do you think I am? A pussy." Long story short, the guy, I guess, stayed up all night in Vegas and gambled away $3.2 million after spending the $29,000 on a private plane. The next morning, he had no idea how he got to Vegas and frantically called the country club to ask what the happened. Story 51. I work at a country club, and you would assume the members are more civil than regular bar patrons. This is not really the case. At a member luau, we found out that a male member was sleeping with another member's wife, which turned into a fight around the pool area. The male who was cheated on was crap-faced and got his ass kicked to hell before the cops came. What a fun night. Story 52. I'm not a bartender, but I was cleaning an under-counter ice machine in a bar one time, and there was a drunk guy sitting at the bar. He asked the bartender for another beer. Even though she was still pretty new to bartending, she knew enough to tell him she couldn't serve him anymore because he was already too drunk and asked him to leave. He got very loud and belligerent and was demanding another beer, and I noticed the bartender got scared and didn't know what to do. So I decided to help her out. I said to the guy, "Excuse me, sir, but she asked you very nicely if you would please leave. Could you just give her a break?" This guy was looking at me and said, "Hey, nobody was even talking to you, got." I looked at him and said, "You know, I sucked one damn idiot in college and I get labeled for life." He just sat there and stared at me for about 30 seconds, not knowing how to respond. So I added, "All right," it was like 5 or 6, but I was really, really drunk. Kind of like you are right now. He ran out. Story 53. It was the end of the night, and being the femie on shift, I had to check the woman's toilets. To my dismay, as soon as I walked in the door, I saw some legs popping out of a stall with a brown pile on the floor. I couldn't clarify if it was vomit or the other substance. I assumed it was both. A wretched smell overcame me, and I had to walk back. I then heard the girl crying, "Oh, I tried climbing over the door, but for once, I am so grateful I am tiny." I ran to get my manager, who had to climb over and retrieve the girl. When he opened the door, she tried to stand up, slipped in her own waist, landed in it, and proceeded to vomit over herself. My manager, being the nice guy that he is, fetched her some water, and a good while later, when she seemed almost normal, he paid for her taxi that he called and gave her a plastic bag to sit on, and a healthy tip for the driver who was reluctant to take her. The girl threw up in the taxi, and my manager got fined $65 because he assured the taxi driver it would be okay. At the beginning of the night, I actually had a girl crush. It's a shame. This is more like a worst moment. Good story, though. Story 54. Our local dental clinic had a farewell party for one of their employees. At the end of the night, there were about 6 people left at the bar, and they wouldn't want to leave and continue drinking. They were all pretty gone, and my partner and I really wanted to get them out of there so we can clean up and go home. My partner busts out some shot glasses and goes, "Shots on the house!" The group goes nuts and start high-fiving each other. My partner then proceeds to pour shots of Coca-Cola into each glass and gives them to the group. As we put the glasses on the counter, one of the girls in the group goes, "Oh no, not Jack Daniels." She and another girl start protesting that they won't drink shots while the guys in the group chide them on. The girls finally agree to drink, and my partner and I lead the last toast of the night. I take my shot and then proceed to look at everyone else and they'll take theirs, reacting as if they all had a hit of moonshine. Oh my God, I'm done for the night. No more for me. Story 55. I was head of security for a local gay bar. We had this guy who would come in and get wasted all the time. This guy was a real piece of crap. About 40 years old, living off his senior-year-old mother, whom he would abuse, according to some other regulars who knew him. He would go from sober to wasted in about 1 hour, at which point I would have to kick him out. He lived a 2-minute walk from the bar. One night, he decided he didn't want to leave. I asked him repeatedly to leave. As I started to gently walk him out, he turns around and takes a swing. I ducked the punch, wrapped him up, and tossed him outside. He stands around the door cursing and screaming, calling me a god. I'm straight and it's a gay bar. He is straight as well. Finally, he starts to walk across the street toward his place, still calling me names and threatening me, throwing his hands up. His pants fall down to his ankles, tripping him, and he face plants into the curb, knocking himself unconscious. He rolls over and is laying on the curb with his junk out, not wearing any underwear, I guess, covered in blood. The 15 or so people watching all pointed and laughed at the sweet instant justice. Story 56. I was working a very large fashion show with VIP guests. After the show, these VIP tables were able to stay and look at certain garments again. During this time, one guy threw up on himself, the table, and the guy next to him. These two, covered in vomit, then got up on the stage and pissed on one of the models. While the security were chasing them out, one of them ran through a large glass door and cut himself up pretty bad. Oh, and when we were cleaning up afterward, we found multiple wine glasses full of piss and vomit hidden under their table. Story 57. I was bartending on a Tuesday or some such, and it's pretty much just me behind the bar, and we get a busload of people that just appear. The weird thing was that out of these people, not one was talking. They all just amble in silently. Turns out it's a group of hearing-impaired people out looking to party. So we figure out a system with notes and pencils and orders, go back and forth. And before you know it, everybody is having a good time. Although despite the room is filled with people, it's dead quiet, like a law library quiet, but with neon signs and the smell of 3-month-old beer in the carpet. The mental discord is killing me. It was like working on the moon. Finally, after hours of boozing and such, it's time to close the bar and notify everyone of last call. Yet, we don't know how to communicate that point to everyone in the bar. What do we do? No time for a big sign? I don't know ASL. There was a few minutes of head scratching until we ended up flashing the lights and hit our necks with our fingers, and everybody got the picture. Story 58. Worked in wedding hall. We had this one small reception with 50 invited, and most of them French Canadians. This is an Italian wedding hall in Quebec, and everyone was having a lot of fun and getting plastered, except for this guy. This guy with a tiny mustache. He's just drinking straight whiskey glass after glass, and he's not looking like he's having any fun. He's just at the bar, drinking alone, not talking to anyone. So, as I serve him a last drink telling him that I'm cutting him off after, just as the groom approaches my bar, tiny mustache guy chugs the whiskey, turns around and yells at the groom, "It should have been me!" Then punches him straight on the chin with all his drunken guy momentum. I had a hard time trying to explain security what had happened over the radio. Story 59. New Year's Eve was always the craptiest night to bartend for 2 reasons. The first, you're working on New Year's Eve. The second is that everyone feels an entitlement to get plastered drunk by midnight. Anyway, it's about 2 minutes to midnight, and some douche orders a round of dark rum shots for him and his lady friend. Who the duck orders shots of dark rum? Against my advice, the two downed the shots immediately after I could tell that the girl entered into the danger zone. Pale face, keeps swallowing, we've all been there. She definitely had to puke, but the ball was dropping and this guy leaned in for an open-mouth kiss to ring in the new year. This sloppy makeout session happened right in front of me for about 10 seconds before this girl bird fed her puke down this dude's throat. His reaction, you ask? He threw up her puke, plus his own puke, all over her dress and my bar. I think it was during this experience that I decided to go to get my ass in grad school. Story 60. I was bartending at a hotel in Hull, England, my hometown. I love Hull, but it has to be said, pretty rough. The hotel was near the university, and it was near graduation time, and a lot of well-to-do parents had been coming to town to see their offspring crowned. This one couple, who were quite posh, couldn't get in the posh hotel they wanted, so were staying in our not-so-posh hotel on this Saturday night, which also happened to be the night the local gypsy families were having some kind of gathering dance deal in the bar area. The posh couple went out for a nice meal someplace and happened to come back just as the gypsy families had all decided it was a good time to start fighting each other. The posh family couldn't get into the hotel because of all the commotion and started to remonstrate with the door staff, not unreasonably. Anyway, some gypsy woman heard the posh lady complaining, ran outside and headbutted her right in the face, broke her nose, hospital and everything. In my town, this passes as humor. It certainly made me laugh. Story 61. 1. Woman got drunk, went to the bathroom to pee, found her about an hour later on the floor, pants down, puke and feces sprayed all over the floor. 2. An attractive middle-aged woman bragged all night about how hot she was while pounding double gray gooses on the rocks. She went to the bathroom for a while, then immediately left. Fast forward to the end of the night, while cleaning the bathroom, I found her dentures sitting on the back of the toilet. Suddenly, not so attractive anymore. 3. Meathead got drunk on a Saturday afternoon and went into roid rage when the jukebox ate his money. He started punching the jukebox, so I yell at him. He flips out and throws his glass at me, but misses and hits a stack of glasses, shattering about 10 of them. Called the cops. When they show up, the guy is chill, but his wife, also drunk, gets mouthy with the cops and winds up being arrested for drunken disorderly as well as the guy. As they were being escorted out, the song he flipped out about started playing.